Cool. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I've got YouTube stream going. Looks like I have got Discord working okay, just to make sure I'm not a dummy again like yesterday. Somebody give me a 1 in chat or speak in the live stream or something. Let me know that my voice is coming through this time. I was so embarrassed about that yesterday that I was just talking to nobody because I forgot to do the push to talk. Turn that off kind of thing. Alrighty. Good morning. I am Marziti here on the Bullish Bears. We have got, thank you, Brian. We're going to go over the pre-market. My session's a little bit different from Signet. Signet does a full market overview. And I, on the other hand, am looking for what am I going to trade today. And so a little bit different. It's complementary. It certainly does not compete with his in any way. Let's talk first of all very quickly about why do we do a morning briefing. Everyone should have a checklist. Everybody should have a morning checklist of things that we check. Excuse me. Everyone should have a morning that we check it every morning to make sure that we cover the bases that are important to us individually. Depending on your trading strategy, maybe it's supply and demand, maybe it's fair value gaps, ICT, maybe it's volume nodes, pivot point, whatever it is. We should all have a checklist. And if you need to write it down, then write it down. That's fine. But go through that checklist, and it can be, part of doing the prep is part of the game plan for the day. And that's what, as Signet goes through it, you'll hear, you'll see Kevin do it. As far as that, Jeremy's a scalper, so he does look at it, maybe not as on a broader time frame. Creedmoor does it, and so on. It all depends on what kind of trader you want to be, what kind you are. But anyway, have a checklist. And I have a checklist that looks something like this, where I remind myself, launch the OBS, create the broadcast, cover the events of the day, which, by the way, today we have new home sales at 10, oil report at 10:30 Eastern Time, and then I just have this little checklist of things that I want to make sure that I review every day as part of my trading strategy. Now, that, what that does, it kind of gives you a certain degree of expectation of what you think what's going to do. And a lot of it has to do with what your time period is, your time frame for trading. Let's go through, with that said, let's go through this. Now, I'm a big fan, and before I forget, let me also say part of your morning routine, or you need to have a morning routine, in my opinion. And so, that may be, maybe you take your vitamins and supplements, maybe you exercise or whatever, and you put that into your routine. And the reason we do that is because if you can't do your morning routine, you're off for the day. You're a little bit off for the day. And that should be important to remember, that you're a little bit off for the day. And so you either need to size down, move to paper, kind of thing, or just walk away, whatever kind of thing. We always have to assess what's going on in our head before we start trading. All right, let's start with the quick overview here. We have crude, we have the ES, we have gold. The NASDAQ I put on here, but let's be honest, most of the time it looks about the same as the ES. The Russell's always interesting. Excuse me. The Russell's always interesting because it can predict what's going to happen on the ES. It can lag what's going on with the ES, or it can walk with it. Now, The predict part is what I'm kind of interested in. Notice here we had in the ES, we had this down and then back up. Well, if we follow that over here in the Russell, we see that the Russell actually ran down long after the ES turned up. But right here, we see that the Russell started to roll over. And I don't know if you can see my mouse all that well down here, but I'm down here in the Russell, and it started to roll over, whereas the ES is going up. But notice that it's kind of losing momentum to the upside. You know, these candles are not quite as big, so it's losing some momentum. The numbers on the screen here are what's called the DeMark, D-E-M-A-R-K, the DeMark sequence. And when you hit a 9, you'll notice it pushes against the numbers, both up and down. Down here at the Russell, you see it push down, push down, push down. And when we hit a 9, we are starting to look for a rollover or a roll up, whichever. In this case here, we've got a signal on the DeMark saying that the ES is getting prime to break south. We see that the Russell has already done that, so that could be a foretell into the future as far as what's going on. So we may possibly, now there's no guarantee to that, but we may possibly have a rollover to the south. We'll see. So let's take a look at and this is my total market summary. This is, and let me just zoom in on that in case you guys are interested in such things. You can screenshot here. Well, shoot, go away. It's the ES, NASDAQ, Russell, VIX, the Dixie, and all that other kind of stuff. All this is also available over in TradingView, except the format obviously is different. But and you'll notice that some things are added and some things are subtracted. So because some things work in opposites. For example, the VX is opposite typically, not always, but typically, of the ES or the NASDAQ. So what I'm looking for is a total summary of the market. And so the total summary of the market has also triggered that 9 on the DeMark, indicating a possible rollover. Okay. The other things that I'm looking for is now we're on the daily. We're on the daily here. I am interested in seeing what's going on with implied volatility. Implied volatility, we're just going to call that what's the level of chaos in the market. Pardon me. Chaos oftentimes means fear. So when IV goes up, we oftentimes will see the markets pull back. When IV is lower, so here I've got red. Red means calmer. So on the daily, I'm not as expecting now again, this is a big picture kind of thing here. We're going to look at multiple things. It does kind of show that the IV is low here, so I would actually expect it to trend sideways and maybe go up. But you can see we've already started this rollover. So these two actually are not in agreement. Okay, well, we're going to zoom more into looking at other mechanics and try and get a 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4 kind of thing. Gold, on the other hand, is the IV is higher, and we see that it's pushing up. So IV, though, oftentimes means chaos, and chaos can work both ways. There was my crude trade. Anyway, just got stopped out. But anyway, the NASDAQ and so on. So what are we seeing here? Well, one of the things I like to really look for is a higher IV telling me there's more chaos in the market. So, okay. So that kind of gives me a check mark for gold. Let's look at the overall trend, though. If we back up on and well, I'll have to back up some days and stuff like that. But at any rate, we've got an indicator for a rollover here, possibly rollover here. Gold looks like it's going to continue its climb. Now the NASDAQ, this DeMark sequence goes, like we say, 1 through 9. So when we hit 4 or 5, this is late trading for that on the daily. Well, obviously we see that the Russell is rolling over. So let's go on down to a lower time frame. Let's go down to the 1 hour. And let's kind of get an idea of what's going on here. Taking a look, just kind of working our way on the charts from left to right, top to bottom. Crude had a low, had a high, came back in, essentially formed a box trade, has not taken out that low yet. We may look for a break since we are kind of expecting crude to go south. I would be looking for, let me just kind of zoom in right here. I would be looking for this low right here as a target, 69.49 on crude. You know, that would be where the liquidity would be. But if we go back, let me zoom back all the way and then go back in. High, low, looks like we're hunting for that low. White for me is the daily floor pivot, not to be confused with Signet's central pivot range. This is the traditional old floor pivots. We've hit support 1. We're heading for support 2. We may look at some statistics on Edgeful about that. The ES has bounced off the central pivot and is headed north. But, you know, we are also seeing, we've got a trend line here. Remember when we talk about trend lines, that a trend line on the higher time frame carries more weight than a trend line on, let's say, so this is the hourly. So a trend line on the hour carries more weight than a trend line on the 5-minute. I can kind of see right here, and I'm going to zoom in on this in just a second, but let's just kind of look right here. Now let's zoom in on that a little bit. So I'm kind of drawing this trend line from around in here going up. We've hit this trend line. We started, this one really doesn't count because that wasn't a trend. This was the beginning of the trend line. Then we went to here. If we are going to continue up, that would put us up here around 5806 or 5806. Is there anything else significant up at that level? Well, we have a resistance, pivot point resistance. We have confluence there. That's very interesting. Let's go in and look at that a little bit closer. Let me scrunch that down. So if the ES continues going north, this is a very interesting because we've got two different things pointing here at 5805, 5806. Two different studies, if you will, and we call that confluence when multiple things agree. Now we did have a significant low. We had a significant, we had a high. It didn't actually take this high out. So this would still actually be the box. So if I draw a box, that would be, actually, no, we did take it out. Okay, I stand corrected. All right, so this area, I would actually have to adjust the box to do these. So we had a low that took out a bunch of lows. We had a high that did take this high out, apparently. We've had a move back inside the box to about 50%. So now we would be looking for this to break either north or south. Now, again, I'm on the hourly, so that's a much slower trade. So we'll zoom down, though, and look at what's going on there. If we're looking for targets here, let's go with our Fibonacci tool. and we'll go for low to these guys. Let me try and get this back in. So we've already talked about this confluence here. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. And where's our, oh shoot, I forgot to turn the 50 on. Well, there's the 50. The 50, if we were to move a full measured move, wait a minute, something's not right. What have I got wrong here? Edit properties, one sec. I got the 50. I want the 1.5. Where's the 1.5? And the negative 1. Yeah, we do. Okay. I got too much junk here. That's part of what it is. Let's see. Let's maximize this cell. Let's try that box again, or that fib tool again. Oh, that's right, because this wick was so far out of bounds. That's why it's made the box humongous. Okay. If that is in fact our low, these are our highs. A 50% move in the box would be up here around 58, 55-ish. That's a pretty extreme move because we had a pretty extreme candle defining our box right here. We might actually look at that differently, and I tell you what, let's just take this to this. This is not as good, but we'll take it, and let's just see what that says, because that looks a little bit more plausible. High, a low that did take out some lows, a move back into 50%. That puts our 50%, well, what do you know? Looky there. Can y'all see that? Look where that 50% falls. Right where this trend line is, right where that pivot point is in that same area around 58.05. So, very, very interesting that, now there's no guarantees that'll happen, and there's certainly no guarantees that'll happen today. Signet talks about the fact that the day is half over because the markets opened 6 p.m. last night, and we've already moved past that point. So we're well over 12 hours done of the day. But there's some thoughts on us for the ES. Okay. Now what I'm looking for is what am I going to trade now? And what I am really interested in is watching for this move in crude over here. I took a quick run at it earlier in pre-market, got stopped out. Not saying that the trade is still not going to happen. I just got to find a better entry on it, and that's fine. Looking down here at the NASDAQ, again, similar kind of pattern. The NASDAQ also had this super wick down here. That was 10 a.m. yesterday, so that was some kind of report. I forget which. But at any rate, so we've got a high, we've got a low. We can do the same kind of thing with the fibs here on the hourly. I am seeing higher volatility on crude, gold. Another thing that I'm also looking for are pivot points, because tighter pivot points, floor pivot points, often tell me that breakouts are more likely to happen and continue. You know, we've moved the goalpost lines tighter to one another, but we still got the same players. So if we move the goalpost off on a American football field, you know, we say there's 100 yards between the goal lines. Well, if we move those goal lines in to, instead of 100 yards, say 75 yards, well, the players are still used to running in 100 yards. So wouldn't you think the odds of them hitting a goal line go up? So when we see that the pivot points move in tighter, the odds of hitting those lines, seems to grow. So, but when they move wider, like in the case of the NASDAQ, here and go away. Stupid thing, you're bugging me. When we see that they're wider, it oftentimes means, though, that they may be harder to hit because we got players used to running 100 yards, but we move the goal lines to 120 yards. So I do like to see tighter ranges here because pivot points are targets. Okay, so let's just kind of go through this real quick here. I got a check mark on crude. We've got a little bit higher volatility. I like that. That's 2 marks. One. So ultimately, I'm going to say I'm liking crude. So let's go over here and mark up crude. And let's see. Yep, I did get stopped out. Okay. Well, so the first thing we want to do, this is that low that I was looking at. Let's come over here. And I'm going to go to the VPOC markup screen. I'm going to move this to daily. Now the studies that I use over here are these. You can get these obviously from the community indicators. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm on the daily. I'm going to hit my volume profiles. And I'm going to first look for the 10-day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Notice that I did not count today. I'm only looking at closed days. All right, let me get rid of this for the moment. Okay. This is the volume profile of the last 10 days. This yellow line coming out of it is the peak where the most volume was over the last 10 days. So that gets some significance. So I'm going to mark that line. I'm going to make that line fat. But because I started this line back over here, and you know, if you've seen my Trade-O-Vate video, you know that Trade-O-Vate has a problem looking at points that start too far in the past and showing it to you in the future. The way I'm going to get around that is I'm going to move one of the endpoints into the future, and I'm going to set it to the year 2025. That way it will show up, let's get back over here, on this 1 minute, 5 minute, 15-minute chart. So I've got one there. I've got, now remember, this is today's volume. I'm not going to look at that yet, not at the daily level. I've got a volume level up here. It doesn't look like we're coming back to it. There we go. Set that one. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time up on the north side. But I do want to look down here. I see this one is kind of in the area. Let's mark that. So what are volume levels? They are, again, those are the areas where a high amount of transactions took place. So they are favorite spots. They're favorite areas for people to come. They make as targets. As you can see, we have and finally, I'm going to do this last one down here. Okay, now we're done with our big daily volume profile. So there's some targets. Okay. Next, let's mark out. Now, normally I would mark out the prior day high and low. We've already busted through it. So I'm not going to put as much weight into it today. Let's move down now into the 15. I don't trade supply and demand necessarily, but I do mark it because it is important to me. What do I mean by important to me? I'm sorry, that was a stupid way to say things. Oops, I forgot to take that volume profile off. Let me dump that real quick. I'm going to keep the lines, but I don't need that. Now let's go down to the 15. Supply and demand areas for me are reactionary areas. I expect things to happen there. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I expect something to happen there. We're also going to mark fair value gaps. Let me just go ahead and mark these here. So we're looking for both fair value gaps and supply and demands. On the 15-minute, we've got one here. Turn that into array. Got one here. Turn that into array. I use gray for my fair value gaps. We've kind of got a little bit, we say, well, what makes a supply and demand? When we have a violent, strong reaction oftentimes that takes out the other side. So we had a rejection here that took out these lows. I would call that as supply and demand. Different people, some people mark just the wicks. Some people mark the wicks, top of the wick down to the close. There's really not much of a wick on this one, so I'm going to mark the here to catch this middle candle. We're going to set you as red. And the same thing here, I'm going to move this into the future. And this does need to be array, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. Let's see. We're going to just follow this back. Let me scrunch this up because we'll be, yeah, okay, we can look at marking this. This is a kind of a big one here, so I'm just going to mark the wicks on that one. That's just my thing. Kevin's got very strict rules and procedures, and that's cool. I'm looking for these not so much as trading areas as reactionary areas. All right, where are we on price? We're down here. So let's start looking down. Let's go with that. We're going to mark you green, make you array. I'm going to move the endpoint into the future. And let's see if there's anything else. Really not that much. Okay. There comes a point you say, how far back should you mark stuff? And a lot of it depends on what your trading time zone is. If you're trading mostly the 1 or the 5, I don't see much point in marking stuff back, 10 days into the past. There's just, your trading style is probably not going to go that far, not going to, whatever. 3-4 days back if you're on smaller time frames. All right. Anything else to mark up here? So we have marked up fair value gaps, supply and demands. We're going to skip the high and prior day high. We've done volume nodes. The last thing is just plain old-fashioned technical analysis. And you know what? It works. What do we see here? We see a low. We see a high. We see a move back into the middle. That forms a box. And so we could, so that's one thing there. So we could take and do our Fibonacci's from here to here. Let's just go ahead and throw that on just to get a quick idea of some targets. So I know this is going to be, we're starting to get a little cluttered. Here's 0. If we break south, we've got a 50% measured move down here. We've got that puts us around what? 6804-ish? we'll call it 68.10. So that's a very 50% measured move. Of course, we've got this fair value or supply, demand. We've got this demand area right down here that would certainly be a target that we could look to go short on right now. And then, of course, like I said, we've got the 50% move down there. Could we go back into this area here? Well, let's take a look. If we, on the other hand, if this was a high and this is a turning point on the low, then 50% back in that box would bring us actually back here to about that, remember I marked that line really heavy, that 10-day volume average. So, very interesting that crude oil might just actually come back here. This purple, pink, this purple line or whatever is VWAP. So notice that it's also in that volume area. We might actually see a halfback move back up to that area. Very possible. Very possible. Okay. So that is kind of what I'm thinking here. I'm looking for either a break here, looking for some, you say, well, what's a break? All right. So we broke this volume node. I'm looking, we've kind of got a retest going on here. Some people will just take the break. We had a spinning top here, and people would have simply gone long when we broke the spinning top. That's fine, because spinning tops and dojis represent indecision. Some people, on the other hand, would say we're looking to break a line, retest that line. Now remember, volume nodes are areas. They're not definitive to the tick kind of things. So we would be looking for a down, an up, and then a break to continue south. So if we're saying it's going south, the real confirmation would be looking for the break here. On the other hand, notice how we're moving green or red here. If on that other hand here we got another spinning top, if we break this north, I might be looking for a long. What would I be targeting? Something up in this fair value gap VWAP, possibly this 10-day volume profile. If we go south, this would be a very short, quick target. Here would be this supply area, and then I would ultimately draw the box back in there again, set my fibs in there. Okay. So I'm probably going to do crude today simply because at this time, that's the one that's showing me the move at this particular time. And actually, when I was looking at this earlier today, getting ready for the morning prep, we were right around in here, and I was expecting this move to go short, but I had to prep and for the show, so I didn't take the trade. And of course, there was the move. It would have been a beautiful move, but it's not the only move of the day. Over here, I've got this 1-minute chart, and I've got volume down here. One of the things I talk about as we're doing the evening trading. Oh, by the way, we had a really good trade last night in the ES for anybody interested in doing the initial balance trade. Had some really good trades there last night. I think I did have a stop. My first trade was stopped out, and then the second trade played out very nicely. Anyway, yeah, I took that trade right there, and I was way too late getting into it. So, what do we see here? Remember, folks, if you draw a diagonal line on a higher time frame in Trade-O-Vate, it probably will not transfer properly onto a lower time frame. It's a quirk with Trade-O-Vate. Talked about that in my Trade-O-Vate videos before. I think we're headed for that fair value gap. It looks like that. Where it goes from there, we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But if we draw snap in a quick trend line, maybe that. I got 3 points touching my trend line there roughly. That's a good line. And let's see. All right, now watch for a spike in volume right here. We're going into that fair value gap. Let's see. Watch the volume. It's not so much the fair value gap as it is this trend line, and what are they going to do? When you hit a trend line, watch to see what the volume does, because remember, the algos know that trend line is there as well. And this is a decision point. So what could I look for here? A break, there it is. See, there it is. Break, retest, or a Busby, as Signet would call it. So if we see a break, we come back to the line, and then we break this north. We're going north for a while, most likely. If we fail this and start coming back south, then this was just a liquidity grab. But you can see, like I said, the algos know. They see those trend lines just as much as we do. And the institutional traders and all that kind of stuff. So, all right. So there's a couple of plays that I already talked. I do think this is possibly still in play on the left over here, this VWAP. Obviously, this fair value gap is now mitigated. I don't believe a fair value gap has to be totally filled, but that's just me. Has anybody got any questions here as I'm winding down? I obviously need to, we got moderators come, or I think Creedmoor today, coming in at 9:15 to 9:30. If anybody's got any questions, you're more than welcome to type a question into the chat, or you can open up on voice. That's perfectly fine with me. During my stream, you're welcome to come in on voice if you have any questions about anything that I've covered, why I choose certain things, and so on. Alrighty then. This is Marziti. I've given you some game plan ideas on crude. I hope everybody has a good day with that, and we'll see everybody when Creed jumps in. Y'all have a good one. Bye.